Hello, it's time for another stacked slices style home build, or scratch build from Building Foam. And this one is kind of a cross between Homeslice 1 and Homeslice 2. So just to recap, Homeslice 1 was a Sky Hunter style twin boom plane with an A-tail, and Homeslice 2 was a flying wing with a sort of a blended wing body section in the middle, like we can see here. So the front part of this plane is very much like a flying wing, and then it has a tail stuck onto it. So hopefully you can see the lineage of each of those styles of plane. In this one we still have the A-tail, and we still have the little vertical fins that are below the CG, as was the case with Homeslice 2 with the flying wing. And it's a pusher, Sky Hunter style mid-mount motor, or whatever you call that. And it still has the blended wing body style fuselage. The fuselage this time I've tried to make it a little bit more tubular, so it's a little bit longer and skinnier, and doesn't come out here so triangularly like the Homeslice 2 does. So the goal with this plane was to make a fairly large wingspan one, and I've tried to get some really good numbers in this OpenVSP aero calculation, and it was showing me something like 25 for the LD number for this, but that's all theoretical, as I found out with the first Homeslice plane, which gave me an LD of 22 in this program, and it was more like about 7 in reality. So remains to be seen what this one will be like, but the numbers are slightly better than Homeslice 1. So there's probably not a whole lot else to talk about it. The airfoil, of course, is not a flying wing airfoil. That's one reason why I didn't just stick a tail onto the Homeslice 2, because I could have done that quite easily, because it had some nice hard points for mounting the fins, and I could have just stuck a tail onto those hard points. But I thought I'd go for a whole new plane and practice my fiberglassing skills with this one, and I fiberglassed the whole thing, and that allowed me to take some liberties with the fuselage by cutting out a little bit more of the interior of it than I would have otherwise, and also making the motor mount sort of very, not quite like that, but very slim and streamlined, and sort of just bulging a little bit at the trailing edge of the wing like that. But anyway, we shall see all that stuff in the photos. So what I'm going to do in this video might stretch into 2 videos, especially with the way I'm waffling in this intro. It's already getting 2 minutes or so. But I'm not going to show any stuff that I've covered already. If you want to see how that's done, you can look in my previous videos. I'll just look at stuff that I've done a little bit differently, I think, in this video. And anything that I've already covered, I'll just skip through. I have taken some photos all the way through, but I'll just skip through it quite quickly, because we've seen all that stuff before, and I'll just show you what is different in this one. These are the templates for cutting the foam. All of them were paper except for the ones that I needed to be on plywood for using the hot wire bow to cut with. And those are the pieces ready to cut after they were cut, stuck together. The wing I made in 3 sections of 30 centimeters each. This is because the foam that I have is 60 centimeters wide, so 30 centimeters is a convenient length, and also because my bow can only fit about 35 centimeters comfortably in it anyway. And I get really quite good results when I stick to this 30 centimeter length and don't try and make any longer cuts than that. So yeah, I'm getting pretty good at that now these days. This is for the wingtip section. I actually sanded most of that down, but I didn't want to cut a straight line, so I just cut the wingtip at the same length but with a symmetrical chord, and then sanded it to how I wanted it to be. This is, yeah, like I say, I'm getting quite good at this. Used to be that there would be a bit of a bowing inward here, so from the trailing edge here it would sort of curve up a bit, not quite as much as I'm pointing at, but you get the idea, and then it would come back down like that. And I've managed to not do that at all this time, and the trick is just to go really, really lightly as you get to the trailing edge, almost like you're not even touching or holding the thing at all, and just sort of try and float the wire to the end and don't press on it against the plywood very much. So this is the wingtip section, so I just cut that off like that and sanded. Yeah, it actually took a fair while to sand that down to what I wanted, but got there in the end. Those are the pieces all together. That's the fuselage. This was a little bit easier to sand than the flying wing one, because it doesn't have a concave section at the back for the reflex like the flying wing did. It's all it's not all convex because this part here is concave, but it's convex in all the easy to sand, all the places that make it easy to sand. So it was much nicer and easy job to get through. That's one of my foils. The motor motor mount I made out of little pieces of plywood like this and stuck them together like that, and it goes, this is the middle, or one of the middle sections, so it's going to go in there like so. One of the drawbacks of making the wing sections the way I did is that you don't have a nice spar hole down the middle of them. So what I thought I'd do for this one is have a go at drilling a hole, and I've seen some people doing this. Andrew Newton has a pretty good video on it, but it just seemed like a bit of a pain in the ass for me until now. But I thought I'd give it a go here because there wasn't really any other way to do it. So I set up these little things to hold my drill bit, if you like. This is my spar hole drilling jig ready to go. The flip side of having to put in the work to make these mounting things is that you don't have to put in too much work to mount the drill, so it's just kind of sitting here on a piece of plywood, and the end here is zip tied through the bench, because I did a little test before and I got the drill turning the wrong way, and it, when the torque increased quite a lot, as it does when it gets deeper in the foam, the handle decided to flip around like that. So shouldn't actually happen if you're turning the drill that way though. Yeah, turning that, or whatever. One way or the other, it shouldn't happen. So I did a little test here. Seems to have gone okay. It wasn't too hard to push through. I tried a couple of different ways of sharpening this. The way that I have at the moment is quite rough, and that seems to actually work better than having having the inside and the outside of the tube tapering down to a knife-like edge. That actually didn't work too well. So you don't want to sort of slice through it, you want to rip through it a bit more, so that the inside of the core that you get is kind of rough. But that actually makes it a lot easier to push through. So this is my test piece. And hopefully the real piece here is going to go okay. I just put a little bit of foam there to make sure it's going to be in the right alignment, and here we go. Well, I've decided that there is room for improvement here, so much room for improvement, in fact, that I'm just going to do this all over again. I'm going to make this piece again, drill everything again, and just start afresh. You may be thinking that this 3mm offset there is no big deal, but it is going to mess everything up, because this bit here is supposed to be going through a plywood rib former here and sitting onto the fuselage, and it's going to be crooked, and I could sand it, but then I've lost this airfoil shape. And it's also going to put some dihedral or maybe anhedral into the wing. It's just going to mess everything up, so I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is, I've decided that I'd be better off drilling the hole first and then doing the hot wire cut around to make the airfoil shape, because that way I can position my hot wire template on the hole instead of trying to do it the other way around. As I'm finding out, it's very difficult to get the hole right on. The other thing that would make things easier to do is you have to put quite a lot of force into this to shove it down the drill, and I hate having to handle these things until I've put the fiberglass on them, because every time I pick them up I'm worried about scuffing them up or dropping them, or dropping things on them and denting the trailing edge and just making a mess of them. But if they're just a solid block, it's a lot easier to sort of handle them and really put some strength into this drilling process. And then the hot wire cut afterwards will make them fragile again, but by that time it won't be an issue. Another thing I'm going to change is that I'm not going to use the aluminium anymore. I thought it would be helpful because it was longer and that I could get a longer base of support between these two things. But it's just a little bit too flexible, so I'm going back to a carbon fibre tube, as Sir Andrew was doing in his video. I'll put a link to that below if you want to watch somebody who knows what they're doing. And I'm just going to stick this on here like that, like I did before. No difference. Actually, there is a difference, an important difference. The distance, I found out that the distance between this point and the drill was part of my problem, because if this distance is long, the drill can sort of press down a little bit on this, which makes it bow up in the middle, and then the side bows down. I'll put a little picture on the screen here to explain that a little bit better. But anyway, if this distance is really, really short, the drill here, you can't really put any flex into it like that from this end because it's just too short. And this has been going pretty well. So I did some test pieces here, and I'm just measuring from the bottom of the foam here to the bottom of the hole, and it's within 1 millimeter every time so far. I've just done three test pieces. I can't really tell the distance there. I'm puzzled though where all the foam is going, because after a cut, when I poke the foam out of the tube, that's it for a 30 centimeter cut, when the aluminium tube was leaving that inside the tube. And it's kind of weird because it's a smooth hole still. Like if I look down the hole, it's a bit hard to see here maybe, but it doesn't look like it's all rough and jagged and the foam's been shoved into the walls or anything like that. It's a bit weird, but anyway, it's working quite well. Okay, so I had to readjust this thing about 10 times again to get it at the right height for these blocks. And I've just finished drilling the holes in those, and my God, what a Herculean effort that was. It seems to be much, much harder to push the drill through these thicker blocks than it was yesterday when I was doing it with these thin ones. I think maybe because there's not too much foam around the edges here, this foam is actually able to part a little bit, so it's sort of flexing around the drill as it goes in and makes it a lot easier. But these ones basically had to muster all of my strength to get it to push through. And the whole bench thing here was sliding after a while, and the drill was shoving back on the zip ties. I actually had to hold this here because the whole carbon fibre tube was starting to slip through the bearings, even though the bearings are quite tight, and it's difficult to do that when you want to. When you don't want it to, it seems to just do it. And my arms were shaking, and by God, what a mission. So, and this is after I put a little bit of that on it the second time. Didn't seem to help much. It's still on there too. I can feel that it's making it a little bit slipperier. So, man, that was really a mission. Not sure if I'll be in a hurry to do it again. On the other hand, the results. Let's look at the results. Pretty good. This is the side going in. So it's like that. And vertically, up and down like that, it is perfect. Pretty much perfect. The hole isn't quite so clean on this side where it came out. Unfortunately though, this hole on this end is 5 millimeters further away from the front than it is at the other end. So ended up with a slight angle there. You can see that, I think. So this one is closer to the front than that one. And I could probably just leave it like that. It would change the sweep, or the sweep of the wing a little bit. But because of the way I've drilled them the same, because my drill is only going one way, they're going to be off one way that way and the other way. They're off in the same way on both wings, which would it won't be symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is I'll just trim a little wedge off here before I put my plywood templates on to do the hot wire cutting, and that should keep the templates parallel or perpendicular to the spar, and I'll just lose a few millimeters of wingspan, but that's alright. So after trimming the ends off like that, I have a nice clean flat surface to put my template on, and the spar is now perpendicular to it. And fortunately, even after moving back 5 millimeters, I have just enough space here to cut this foil from. That was cutting it a bit fine. Here's the fuselage with the center section cut out, and as before, I'm just going to put a plywood panel on the bottom like that to hold the battery. I've changed the length of the piece that I put down the middle. You can see the little slot for this there. That's where that's going to go. And in my past planes, I've made that go quite a ways down here. But I figured that I don't really need it, so I've just brought it up to about where this plywood starts, and I'm hoping that the fact that I'm going to be fiberglassing along the bottom of this whole, well, around the whole thing, should keep it strong enough. So this is another thing I tried that's a little bit different. Instead of gluing all the fuselage sections together, I tried using double-sided tape, because I found when I was doing another project recently, the little Delta Sloper, I just held that together temporarily with this tape while I was sanding it, and it felt really, really strong and solidly stuck together. So I thought maybe I could do this. And what's nice about this is that if you trim the tape like this so that it's not quite reaching the outside surface, you don't have anything getting in the way of the sandpaper when you're sanding. And all of the slices blend into each other very, very nicely, which you don't get if you have hardened Gorilla Glue sort of poking out there. Sanding's not quite so easy. So I thought I'd give this a try, and I'm still undecided on whether I'll do it again because, just skip through some more of these photos. It had its down points, as we'll see a little bit later on. These are the holes for air vents at the front. I decided to make some specific holes for this rather than reusing the holes that I had for the positioning pins because they're not really in the right direction. So that's getting stuck together there. This, I put some glad wrap around this because I didn't want it to get stuck in with the Gorilla Glue. The central section I did actually Gorilla Glue the main part here where the plywood is stuck in there because I wanted that to be a very solid join. This is obviously Gorilla Glued as well. I've cut out, as I said at the beginning, I've cut out a little bit more of the interior of the fuselage than I have in previous builds because I'm going to be fiberglassing over the whole thing, so I'm hoping that that should help it to stay together solidly. And I also wanted to have a little bit more clear space in here for my spar connection, as we'll see a little bit later on. On this wing the airfoil is quite thick, so I thought I'd get fancy and try and sizzle a hole with this hot wire thing down the middle of it to route the servo cables through. This cable, I mean this hole doesn't need to be nice and smooth, so I didn't need to drill this one, and it's a lot easier to do it with this one because you don't need to use any force at all to push it through. You just let the heat do its work. What? The heat's all gone up by the looks of it. Well, it's not too critical. The main thing is that it doesn't pierce the surface of the wing here. This is just a test piece that I'm trying. And just a few more photos from different angles. You'll note that there's quite a bit of space around the spar, like I said, and we'll get to that in a minute. And I put a little bit more foam around the motor mount area so that I could sand that and shape it nice and smooth, and I'll put some putty in here after this. And that's the top and the bottom there, and it looks a little bit like this. Not too happy with the way the plywood is directly onto the foam, and there's quite a bit of gap in there too. I haven't quite finished the build at the moment, but the last remaining thing is to do something about making this a little bit more solid in here. I filled out the sides of that area a little bit with epoxy and microspheres, and since I knew I was going to be doing a fair bit of sanding on this area, I didn't want it to be too hard, and even with the microspheres in there it can be still very hard, so I put a ludicrous amount of the microspheres in there until the mixture is quite stiff and solid before it even went on, and that turned out to be not too bad, but still, even so, it was more sanding than I was hoping for. And I had a little bit of that left over, so I put some on here just to try and make this hatch seat in a little bit nicer. I've just discovered a rather annoying problem. I have the full spar going all the way through here now, so it's perfectly straight on the front spar, and when I line up the leading edge of the wing at the same height on each side, and I look at the trailing edge on this side, everything's fine, but when I come over here, in order to make it so that the trailing edge of this section of the wing is at the same height as it is on that side, it has to be tilted down that much. So there's a good 6 millimeters or so difference at the back. So it means that there's quite a bit of twist in this wing already, and it might be alright, but since I've detected it at this point, I'd like to get rid of it. And the only way I can think to do it is to either just stick the wing on here like that and put up with this little funny like discontinuity there, or what I might give a little quick try now is trying to break apart these slices here, just these 4, and hopefully because they're taped on, they're not Gorilla Glued on, they might be able to just separate. But the problem is that when I was sticking those on, I was just sort of aligning one to each other successively, and I did have the spar at the front and inside while I was doing it, but I didn't have the spar up the back all the way through. I just sort of had a partial section of it as I went, and that has caused this problem, I think. So let's see what I can do about it. Well, that actually went surprisingly well. I was able to get these 3 slices off without damaging them too much. You have to sort of press quite hard so the edges got a bit squashed in some places where my fingers were. And I'll just reposition them back on, but I'll put full spars all the way through to make sure that they're going in the right place this time. Ideally, I'd also reposition the slice here, but because it has a cavity in the middle, I can't really get a good press on it to pull it off. I'd probably break it if I tried to do that.